This video teaches one of Barry Harris's greatest ideas he calls borrowing. Hello, I'm Pete Martin. If you would like to see more videos in this series or other videos of mandolin, fiddle, improvisation, and other music subjects, subscribe to my channel. Click the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Because many concepts build on previous videos, if you are new to Barry's ideas, I suggest you go back and start with video number 1 in the series. There's a PDF file that goes along with this video. Find this by going to www.petemartin.info, click on Videos, and scroll down to the Barry Harris Mandolin series. Borrowing is one of the most interesting part of Barry Harris's chording system. Using the major and minor 6 diminished scales we have been studying in the last number of videos, borrowing simply means taking one or more notes from the diminished chord and putting them in place of the 6th chord, or vice versa. Let's see how this is done. Example 1 shows us a C6th chord with 3 borrowed voicings. Each borrowed note is from the diminished above the C6th chord. C6 with borrowed D, with borrowed G sharp, and with borrowed B. Example 2 shows us a C6th chord and 3 different borrowed voicings. Each borrowed note is from the diminished below the C6th voicing. C6, borrowed B, borrowed F, and borrowed G sharp. Example 3 shows us different C6 chord and 3 borrowed voicings. Each borrowed note is from the diminished above or below the C6th voicing. C6, borrowed D, borrowed B, and a different borrowed D. Of course, borrowing works on minor 6 diminished voicings as well. Example 4 shows us a C minor 6 chord and 3 borrowed voicings. Each borrowed note is from either above the diminished or below the diminished. C minor 6, borrowed B, borrowed F, and borrowed D. Barry likes to talk about movement when discussing chords. He likes to tell a story that Coleman Hawkins said to him, and that's, "I don't play chords, I play movements." This is very much a strength of the 6 diminished system. You have a scale of chords to move through in a chord progression. One way to get more movement is to borrow and resolve the borrowed note. If you're on a 6th chord, you can borrow a neighboring diminished note, then resolve it. If you're on a diminished chord, borrow a note from the neighboring 6th chord and resolve it. In example 6, we borrow and resolve the top note all the way through the C6 diminished scale. You should learn to do this for all of the different voicings and for major and minor diminished chord scales we've worked on. If you like the material presented here, you may be interested in some of the 13 instruction books I've written for fiddle, mandolin, and improvising. My website, petemartin.info, has videos, articles, and information about private lessons in Seattle or online. You can also use 6 diminished scales with borrowed notes in any place you desire. A good thing to practice is moving up and down the 6 diminished chord scale, not resolving the borrowed notes. This leads you to all kinds of interesting colors in your chord voicings. Example 7 is the C6 diminished scale with the top note, a borrowed D, going up the scale without resolving. Example 8 has borrowing in both directions before resolving. Example 9 shows one way of using borrowed notes to create more movement on a 2-5-1 progression in the key of G major. We'll use the C6 diminished for A minor 7, E flat minor 6 diminished for D7, and G6 diminished for G7. In the third C6 voicing, we borrow F, then resolve to E. This leads very nicely to the E flat note in the E flat minor 6th chord. At the end, we play a G6 chord with a borrowed A note that goes down to G and F sharp. It also shows us that unresolved notes can sound just fine left that way. This is a G major 7 chord. Barry actually sees a major 7 chord as a 6th chord with a borrowed note. In this case, the G6 chord has the borrowed note F sharp. Your assignment is to practice 6 diminished and minor 6 diminished chord scales in all keys using borrowed notes. You can resolve them or not as you choose. Look for these places in tunes to use these in chord progressions. When you can do this in several keys comfortably, move on to the next video. If you have questions or suggestions, please use the comments section below. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the like button. I'm Pete Martin. Thanks for watching.